As this Orioles offense has had some significant struggles lately, it starts to make you wonder, who is next? Who are those next hitting prospects for the O's? Well, I'll tell you who they are coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Friday, June 27th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to take a look at some of the top hitting prospects in the Orioles system, get you an update on how they're doing at this point, basically halfway through the 2025 minor league year. Some guys where it's going well, some top prospects not so much. Give you the latest update on some of those guys. And then some other Orioles news and notes, a couple of major leaguers on rehab assignments, and then get you ready for Orioles Rays at the Yard this weekend. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So Orioles were off on Thursday night after dropping 2-3 to the Rangers. They'll start a series with the Rays tonight, which we'll preview at the end of today's show. But if you remember about a week or two back, I did an episode doing a check-in on the Orioles' top pitching prospects in the system at this point. This is really the best status the Orioles pitching program in the minor leagues has been in since Mike Elias took over. A lot of talented arms all the way up to Double-A Chesapeake at this point. So I wanted to kind of do a check-in on how they're doing. Well, the system since Elias took over in 2018 has really been known for its hitting prospects. And a lot of those guys have either made it to the majors or have been traded away to other teams for other talent. And so we're getting closer to the point where I think, honestly, once Samuel Basallo and Coby Mayo graduate, we may look at this as a system with maybe better pitching than hitting for the first time. It's certainly a possibility, but there are still some talented bats in this system. So I'm going to do this similar to how I did the pitching episode a couple of weeks ago, where I rank my top 6 hitting prospects in the system. This is my personal rankings. I give you an update on all 6. Some of this is statistically based. Some of it is eye test based. I give usually a bump to guys who are in double or triple A because you see them more, you get more data on those guys. I feel better about evaluating them. I am not a full-time prospect guy. Check out Orioles on the Verge. They'll do a much better job of covering this Orioles system if you're looking for another podcast to check out. But I will definitely say that there's at least one guy on this list who I might be the high man on. There are some interesting names of honorable mentions I'll talk about. But yeah, let's just roll through the list and talk about some guys, some hitting prospects, and some who could even be in the big leagues here in 2025. Now, I will say, technically, I think Coby Mayo is still a prospect. Unsure. Either way, he's currently on the big league roster, and he's been there for a little bit. Don't think we need an update on Coby Mayo, so he would be right behind Samuel Basallo for me if he were on this list, but I didn't put him there. Either way, we start with Samuel Basallo, a pretty much, except for like one place, consensus top 10 prospect in baseball. He is the consensus number 1 prospect in the Orioles system, and that doesn't change for me either. A 20-year-old left-handed hitting catcher who is currently in AAA Norfolk. He was an Orioles international signing back in 2021, and to this date, the most talented player so far that Mike Elias has signed in an international class. And he's been in AAA all year, and he has just been tremendous. In 204 plate appearances, Basallo is slashing 266, 382, 580, 15 homers, a 16% walk rate, which is incredible, a 23% strikeout rate, which is usable, and it's a 151 WRC plus in AAA Norfolk, meaning as a 20-year-old, one of the youngest players in AAA, he's been 51% better than a league average AAA hitter this year. He's got a 57% hard hit rate, which is absolutely elite. That's like Gunnar Henderson levels or better of hitting the ball hard. A 116 mile an hour max exit velocity, which is awesome. Those numbers are up. His walks are up. His strikeouts are down. He's still yet to face a pitcher who is younger than him, so he's always facing older talent. And he continues to produce. Now, he has dealt with some elbow and hamstring injury issues that's caused him to miss some time this year. It's also caused him to not catch as much. So he has only caught 17 games in AAA this year. Otherwise, he's played a good amount of first base and done some DHing in Norfolk. So that still has to catch up. And we've talked about that this week on the show. That's the main reason why, even with all the catcher injuries to the Orioles, Basallo is not in the big leagues right now. He's caught 17 games. That's the most important part of being in that position. He's got to get more reps in AAA. And his receiving and his blocking still needs a little bit of polish, but he's getting better and better defensively. He's got a strong arm. He's a good thrower. He still swings a lot, and maybe, even though he can make contact with everything, he maybe swings at too many bad pitches or pitches out of the zone that he knows he can hit, but maybe not drive as well as he can if he's a little more selective. So that's something that might need to change. But I mean, in the month of June, he's got a 1127 OPS and a 193 WRC plus. I mean, his bat is pretty much almost big league ready. It's just a matter of when the glove specifically behind the dish is ready. And I think for Basallo, we probably see him in September as a expanded roster call-up to mostly DH and maybe catch once a week for the Orioles in September, get his feet wet in that position, and then just get the bat into the lineup to work out some issues. And then hopefully he's on the opening day roster in 2026 in a really impressive catching tandem between him and Adley Rutschman, and the Orioles kind of go from there. He is a very exciting prospect, and it is going to be really, really fun to see him when he finally does get to the majors. Number 2 on my list is Enrique Bradfield Jr., the 23-year-old left-handed hitting outfielder who is currently in Double-A Chesapeake. He was the Orioles' first-round pick out of Vanderbilt back in 2023. And in Double-A so far this year, he has been solid. 155 plate appearances. He's hitting just 240. It's kind of down for his average, with a 378 on base, which is great, and only a 356 slugging. That's typical Bradfield. He has walked the exact same amount of times as he has struck out. He's got an elite 16% walk rate with a really low 16% strikeout rate. He has only hit 1 home run this year, but it's not really the player that he is. He stole 15 bases, and he's got a 112 WRC plus overall in Double-A. Now, Bradfield has dealt with some injuries this year, missed about 5 weeks from mid-April to mid-May with a hamstring issue, came back, and then was pulled from Sunday's Double-A game with an issue in the other hamstring. Now, he's not currently on the injured list, but he has not played since Sunday, so good news, they didn't put him on the IL. Bad news, he's missed the last 3 games, so hopefully he returns to the lineup tonight in Double-A. And since he returned from the first hamstring injury, he has hit just 209. Even though the walk and strikeout numbers have been the same, the average has gone a little bit down. I wouldn't necessarily call him fully a slap hitter, but you watch him, he kind of profiles like that. It's elite speed. It is absolutely plus elite center field defense. He's got a great batting eye. He's got awesome contact skills bat to ball. He just really doesn't have power in that bat to produce a lot of home runs and hit the ball super, super hard. So for him, it's really about, okay, how much will he be able to eventually hit big league pitching and specifically catch up and drive big league velocity? We just don't know yet. And he's going to put the ball in play a lot. He's going to rely on his speed, but he's also going to be kind of a BABIP-reliant player where he's going to go through stretches where he's hitting the ball, popping it up too much and not getting a lot of hits. And he'll go through stretches where all of his ground balls are going through the hole and he's hitting 400 for a 3-week stretch. Like, it's going to be up and down. Again, he's hitting 240 this season. Average is kind of more important for Bradfield than it is for other types of players. He needs to be hitting at a higher average than 240, but he's still getting on base at a good amount. And that's just as good as a single for him, because he's going to take off and steal second and maybe even steal third. And the Orioles are kind of focusing and working with him on having him hit more line drives into the gap. It's really a prospect where his floor is a 4th outfielder off the bench in the majors, because the speed and the defense are just that game-changing. He's kind of like Chandler Simpson, who came up with the Rays this year with incredible speed, except Bradfield is a world's better center field defender than Simpson is, so he could actually be a better player, although the bat for him is not quite where it is for Chandler Simpson at this point. It's just a really interesting profile. Like, he's obviously not going to debut this year. He could make the majors at some point in 2026 if we see him get to AAA and have some success there, and also depending on what the future is of Cedric Mullins, the Orioles' current center fielder, who is a free agent after this year, and we'll see what they do with him at the deadline and then potentially in the offseason, how willing the Orioles are to move Colton Cowser full-time to center field next year if Mullins is not back. There's a lot of questions there. By 2027, Bradfield will be in the big leagues, hopefully with the Orioles. But next year will be interesting depending on how much that bat produces. And hopefully these hamstring injuries he's dealing with don't become kind of a long-term thing. Next up on my list, number 3 of the hitting prospects in the system is Dylan Beavers, the 23-year-old left-handed hitting outfielder who is currently in AAA. He was the Orioles' competitive balance round 33rd overall pick back in the 2022 draft out of Cal. And Beavers has been one of the best hitters in the Orioles system this year. In AAA this year, in 244 plate appearances, he's hitting .312 with a .403 on base and a .478 slugging. He's got 7 homers, really good 14% walk rate, pretty low 19% strikeout rate. It's a 140 WRC plus. Now, he's not scorching the ball. His 42% hard hit rate is around average, maybe a little above average, but he does get his bat on the ball. You know, it's been a lot of swing changes for Beavers since he entered the system. Had a really weird herky-jerky swing that still worked in college when he was at Cal, but the Orioles identified immediately, hey, there's talent in there, but we got to make some adjustments here. They've worked a lot with Beavers. John Bioli over at the Baltimore Banner, and even before that, has done a great job kind of chronicling in his writing all the Orioles' work with Dylan Beavers. But they seem to have found a place where he feels comfortable, and he is producing at the highest level of the minor leagues. Now, he did miss a week late in May with a shoulder injury when he ran into a wall. Then he left Friday's game with another shoulder injury on a collision. So we were a little worried, like, did he re-aggravate that? Well, luckily, he returned to the Norfolk lineup on Thursday night. That is a really good sign for Dylan Beavers. He seems to be able to definitely handle the corner outfields defensively and can be put in center field if you need to. I think long-term, you'd much rather have him playing right field or even left field, but center field in a pinch, it's much better than Heston Kjerstad, where it's like, do you even want him in the outfield? It's a guy who you want in the corners, and he could play center if you absolutely needed him to. He is Rule 5 eligible for the first time this offseason, which means the Orioles are going to have to add him to the 40-man roster sometime between now and December, which to me says I think he gets a shot in the big leagues at some point this year, especially depending on what the Orioles do at the deadline. If the O's trade at least one of, and if not both, Cedric Mullins and Ramon Laureano, and really you can kind of also add Ryan O'Hearn to that mix, I think Beavers gets a shot. If they trade one of them, it's a maybe. I think the real question is, does Beavers have a chance to kind of jump Heston Kjerstad in the pecking order right now among Orioles outfielders, because Kjerstad had been so bad this year. He's now been optioned back down to AAA. So they're both in the Norfolk outfield pretty much every day at this point. And Beavers is just producing much better this year. Although again, he hasn't had any time at the major leagues while Kjerstad has. And the Orioles, I think, still see, and I still see Kjerstad as the better long-term player. But there's a chance for Beavers. His opening is now, and I'm intrigued to see what that swing looks like if he does get his big league chance this year. But got 3 more guys on my top 6 to get to coming up next. We'll talk about last year's first-round pick. We'll talk about a guy who the Orioles tried a bunch and finally got to in the draft a couple of years ago. And then we'll get to our youngest prospect on this list, the Orioles' biggest international signing ever, who I am still a big fan of. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app, they actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worrying out of buying. And Game Time, well, it's the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB and Locked On Orioles, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting MLB game coming up, maybe this weekend. 3-game series, Orioles and Rays. There are plenty of great deals on Game Time if you want to go get some tickets right now. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That is LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. And the app as well. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So now to check in on numbers 4 through 6 in my Orioles list of top hitting prospects. And number 4 is Vance Honeyut, the 22-year-old right-handed hitting outfielder who is currently in High A Aberdeen, who the Orioles took out of North Carolina with their first-round pick in last year's draft in 2024. And he is up in High A. That's where he's been all season. it hasn't been growing great. He's been playing every day, stayed healthy, 250 plate appearances at the high A level. He's hitting just 185 with a 304 on base and a 284 slugging. He's got just 2 homers. He's walking a good amount at 13%. He is striking out 40% of the time this year. He does have 19 stolen bases, but it is just an 80 WRC plus. He has been 20% worse than a league average high A hitter so far this year. And really, he was drafted as a guy who's a great center field defender, great speed, really, really good power when he connects. And even though he was a star at UNC on a really good team, all of the questions surrounding Honeycutt were about all of the swing and miss he had in his game. He was a guy who, nobody had really ever been taken that high in the draft who had that high of a strikeout rate that Honeycutt did have in college. And the question was, hey, when he makes contact, it goes far. He plays amazing defense. He runs well. He has a high floor and his ceiling is high, but there's a lot of variance in this player. And it's been bad so far. The Orioles are clearly working with him on things you can't take fully just from the results in high A in his first full professional season. You got to give him time. But a 40% strikeout rate in Aberdeen makes you think he's going to get to Double-A Chesapeake, if not this year, then at the beginning of next year. How high does a K rate go then if the Orioles haven't made those adjustments yet? Now, I think the bigger issue, because we always knew he had issues with the Ks, but when he would make contact, the ball would go far. I think the bigger issue is that he's only slugging 284 with 2 home runs despite playing every single day. When he's actually connecting and when he's not striking out, he's not doing damage. And that's what's even more concerning for me. Hopefully it's just a situation with the Orioles doing so much with him that it's tough to translate it to a game. Hopefully he can heat up and get maybe a taste of Double-A by the end of the season, because I really want to see how he fares against upper minor league pitching, how bad the strikeouts could look, or potentially how much he fixes it. I am in no way writing off Vance Honeycutt. That's why he's still number 4 on my list of position player prospects. But I'd like to see a little bit of a turnaround from him, at least in the strikeout rate and power department in the second half. Number 5 on my list is a guy who has had similar problems in his career. That is Jud Fabian, the 24-year-old right-handed hitting outfielder who's currently in AAA Norfolk. He was a competitive balance 67th overall pick by the Orioles out of Florida back in the 2022 draft. Been having a solid year in AAA Norfolk, 255 plate appearances. He's been pretty much healthy all year. 221 average, 332 on base, 441 slug, 12 home runs, tied for the team lead at one point with Samuel Basallo. He's got a 15% walk rate, which is good. 28% strikeout rate is pretty high, but we'll talk about that. It's a 108 WRC plus for Fabian. The walks are up and the strikeouts are down. And that is huge for Fabian, who had maybe not quite the Honeycutt levels, but big levels of holes in his swing and swing and miss in his game. So to get the strikeout rate even down to 28% is a nice number for Fabian to be at with his walk rate spiking so high. Again, 43% hard hit rate, very similar to Beavers. It's solid, but it's not anything close to elite. Issue is great outfield defender, huge power, but also has those swing and miss issues. Now he's gotten them better. That's allowed him to still, be an above average hitter in AAA and get him closer to the big leagues, but it's still going to be an issue. And now he's going to have a little less time to work on it, because on Thursday, I mentioned he'd been healthy all year. Before Thursday's game, he was placed on the AAA injured list with a left wrist strain. So hopefully it's a short-term injury for Fabian and he can return to the Norfolk lineup soon, but he is out. He's another guy who's Rule 5 eligible this offseason. He has a chance to debut later this year if guys like Laureano and Mullins and O'Hearn are traded at the deadline. But I hope he gets healthy and we can continue to see what they have in him, because the Orioles will have a really interesting Rule 5 protection decision make on Jud Fabian if he doesn't debut this season and they get to December having to make that call. He'll be a really interesting case for the O's as they try and think about what that 40-man roster is going to look like. And then the 6th player on my list that I'm going to talk about is a guy that some national outlets, even Eric Longenhagen at Fangraphs, who I go to as kind of at least one of my top prospect people that I read about covering the Orioles and other teams, he did not have Luis Almeida on his top 40-plus prospects he did for the Orioles back in January of this year, I believe. He was not in on Luis Almeida, but he is number 6 on my list. A 19-year-old right-handed hitting shortstop who is currently in Loe Delmarva. He was a 2023 international signing by the Orioles out of the Dominican Republic, set the Orioles record bonus. They gave him $2.3 million to sign out of the DR. Now, Almeida is an interesting story. Was actually born in New Jersey, but moved to the Dominican Republic during his teenage years. His mom and his mom's family are all from the DR. He was a potential, high, big-time college program guy, maybe first-round pick eventually in the MLB draft, to becoming an international prospect. It was kind of an interesting track to get where he is. And at this point, he's performing better in Delmarva. He got the call up to Delmarva earlier this month. He's got a 122 WRC plus there. Overall this season, between the FCL and Delmarva, 112 plate appearances, 263, 348, 394 slash. He is not homered yet. 10% walk rate, 23% strikeout rate. It's a 113 WRC plus. I want the power to come around, but a lot of people were kind of out on him, and the swing seems to look a little better, and I'm liking what I'm seeing from him so far in Delmarva, finally getting to full season ball. I'm just, 2 years out from being the Orioles' biggest international signing ever and putting up good stats in his first full season appearance. I'm not ready at all to write off a 19-year-old Luis Almeida. Maybe he can get one more promotion and get to Aberdeen by the end of the year. If not, he'll begin next year in Aberdeen and potentially be able to get to Double-A as a 20-year-old. That puts you on a good track. I like Almeida. I'm probably the high man at this point among people, covering the Orioles on Luis Almeida. But I think there is really still something there that the Orioles saw. I like his defense at shortstop as well. I think that's getting better when I've been able to, watch it. Again, didn't really get to watch him play much before Delmarva, but now I've been watching him some in Delmarva. And I don't know. I just like the way he swings the bat. I trust the Orioles with giving out that much money to an international player just 2 years ago. I think there really could be something here. But those are my top 6. Still got some honorable mentions. But let me know here in the Locked On Orioles YouTube comment section. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And also let me know, hey, who would you rank as your top 6 hitting prospects in the Orioles system right now, and how would you change around the list that I had? But I do have some honorable mentions and some other news and notes to get to. That's coming up in the final segment of today's episode. So as I did with the pitching version of this episode a couple of weeks ago, wanted to name 4 honorable mentions to really kind of swing together like what I see as the top 10 guys in the system right now. And again, this is heavily weighed with how they're doing this year, how high they are in the system, guys I've been able to watch versus guys I really haven't been able to watch, whether it's in person or at least on MILB TV. So 4 guys as honorable mentions. 2 guys were draft picks last year. Ethan Anderson, kind of the catcher, first baseman, outfielder from the second round last year out of Virginia. He's got just a 90 WRC plus in Aberdeen. It's been a slow start, but I like his game. I liked watching him at Virginia. Griff O'Farrell is another guy out of Virginia. The Orioles took 32nd overall last year, a shortstop, kind of a great glove guy, not a lot of power, but good hit tool. He's got an 80 WRC plus in Aberdeen, also struggling, but a guy who really could be a big leaguer. And there's a lot of Jordan Westburg in that profile for Griff O'Farrell. Then you got 2 guys who are really popping this year. Yasmiel Boucher is the first one. He is a 20-year-old left-handed hitting catcher who is still in Delmarva, should probably get the bump to Aberdeen soon. 2021 international signing out of Venezuela, kind of a late bloomer a little bit, but he has a 158 WRC plus in Delmarva, putting up one of the best offensive seasons in the Orioles system so far. I got my eye on him. And then the guy who is popping more than anyone right now is Nate George, an interesting draft pick from last year. The Orioles took him out of high school in the 16th round of last year's draft. Usually high schoolers who go in the 16th round are guys you pick just in case you can't sign your second round pick and you have money left over and you can throw it all to a 16th rounder that you think is probably going to go to college, but maybe you can convince him not to. Instead, Nate George just joined the Orioles. He's a 19-year-old right-handed hitting outfielder, and he was in the FCL to start the season. He went to Delmarva about a month ago, and he's got a 171 WRC plus between those 2 levels and has been absolutely destroying the baseball. He's like this huge energy guy in Delmarva. I've watched a few of his games now where he's just sprinting around the outfield and sprinting around the bases, and he'll probably have to pull back on that a little bit as he gets higher and higher into this minor league system. But he was a guy where his agent went out and was like tweeting, this is the next Mike Trout, when the Orioles drafted him, or when he actually signed with the Orioles. And it's kind of like, you roll your eyes like, yeah, man, slow down. And you still kind of roll your eyes at comparing him to Mike Trout. But out of all the players the Orioles took in last year's draft, I think he's had the biggest pop so far this year, at least lately, has been Nate George. So I had to throw him on here at the end of my honorable mentions. Like, keep your eye on this guy. It's cool in Delmarva. Maybe he can sneak his way to Aberdeen by the end of the year. Like, keep your eye on Nate George. Really interesting deep pool from the Orioles in last year's draft. But that's kind of my honorable mentions from the hitter list as well. We'll talk some more minor leagues as the year goes on, especially if the major league team continues to play poorly. Probably more and more minor league coverage from time to time coming up here on Locked On Orioles for the remainder of the 2025 season. But a few more news and notes to get to before we finish off the show. Wanted to start with Cade Povich, who threw a rehab start in AAA Norfolk on Thursday. Remember, Povich has been on the injured list since June 16th with left hip inflammation. On Thursday, it wasn't the greatest line. He went 4 1/3, 7 hits, 5 runs, 3 earned, 3 Ks, a walk, no homers. He threw 75 pitches. He allowed only 1 hard hit ball in the game. I believe they were facing the Braves AAA affiliate on Thursday. Got 13 whiffs on 37 swings. His velo looked pretty normal. I think overall a really positive and productive rehab start for Povich. He would be eligible to come off the injured list, I believe, next Tuesday or Wednesday potentially. So the next time he'd be available to pitch, I think he could come off the IL. Now the question just is, will the Orioles do it? Like, where does he fit into the rotation right now? He does have options, so they could keep him in AAA Norfolk for longer. They could keep him on the rehab assignment for as long as they want. Because right now, I get that Tomoyuki Sugano and Zach Eflin are both struggling a little bit, but those aren't guys who are going to lose their rotation spots right now. Those guys are keeping them. The guys who were more on the bubble of their rotation spot, Charlie Morton, Dean Kramer, Trevor Rogers, have been pitching so much better over the past few weeks that none of the three of them deserve to lose their rotation spot right now. So for Povich, it's like, unless you want to go to a 6-man rotation, which I don't think the O's would because they've got some off days and obviously the All-Star break coming up, maybe Povich could come back to the big leagues as a long reliever and, kind of replace Scott Blewett, and it would give you a third lefty back in the bullpen along with Keegan Aiken and Gregory Soto, and that would allow you to maybe figure out his problem where, he'd have 3 good innings or 4 good innings and then just fall apart in some of his starts this year. Maybe as a long reliever, he can go through the lineup once or twice, and that'll be helpful to him. I'm interested to see what they do, but right now, one thing you can't do is take Trevor Rogers' rotation spot away from him. After he gives you 8 scoreless against the Rangers on Monday, unless his next start is the worst thing we've ever seen, I don't think you're taking a rotation spot from him. Jorge Mateo is also playing in rehab games in AAA on Wednesday and Thursday. He played in games, been on the IL since June 10th with left elbow inflammation after a collision with Heston Kjerstad. That was that surgically repaired elbow from last year has kind of flared up again. He homered on Wednesday. He's 2 for 6 with a home run in the 2 games. Orioles have said it'll be a bit of a longer rehab stint for Mateo, so I wouldn't expect early next week he's back with the Orioles. It'll take a little longer. When he does come back, it's probably just him taking the roster spot of Luis Vasquez. We know Tyler O'Neill is also on rehab in AA, so he's trying to make his way back as well. But Mateo, nice to see him hit a home run, and hopefully he can pull it back together on the rehab stint. And one more injury update is Braxton Bragg, who, when I did this pitching episode a couple of weeks ago, I named him the top pitching prospect in the Orioles system. He had been incredible, but he had just went on the injured list with a forearm issue. And sometimes forearms turn into elbows, and it turns very bad. I was very worried. Well, it turns out he only needed about 2 weeks of rest on the injured list, and he returned on Sunday to start in AA Chesapeake. He went 4 1/3, 1 run, 5 hits, 5 Ks, and a walk. Seemed to be normal Braxton Bragg. He now has a 1.30 ERA in 55 1/3 innings this year between single A and AA. I mean, that is why he's the top pitching prospect in this system for me. Just incredible stuff he is doing for an 8th-round pick from a couple of years ago. All-Star voting updates. Ryan O'Hearn and Jackson Holliday are the 2 All-Star Game finalists in the American League at their positions. The way they're doing the voting this year is there's the first round of voting where everybody's involved. Then you take the top 2 from the first round of voting, advance them to the finalist round, wipe the vote counts, and the voting starts again. So at second base in the American League, it's Jackson Holliday versus Gleyber Torres of the Tigers. And at DH in the AL, because Rafael Devers was traded, it's Ryan O'Hearn versus Ben Rice of the Yankees. Don't know if Holliday deserves to start. It would be cool. O'Hearn absolutely deserves to start, so hopefully he does get voted into that spot. And even if O'Hearn doesn't start, he will be a representative for the All-Star Game. I think Holliday would be more on the border. I do still think he would get put in by the players and coaches if he doesn't get voted in by the fans. But O'Hearn is absolutely going to be an All-Star, and just what a continued renaissance for this guy and his career. And finally, we got some baseball coming back tonight, right? The Orioles didn't play very well in their last 2 games, at least in the big moments, and they get an off day Thursday, and now they play the Rays again. Didn't we just play the Rays? Yeah, but they play them again. They just split a 4-game series in Tampa last week. We know what should have happened in that series, blowing an 8-0 lead. They should have won 3 of 4, but they get to play them again. It starts at 7:05 tonight. That game is on Apple TV Plus, so remember, not on MASN, only on streaming tonight. The Rays are 46-35. They have gone 5-1 since that series against the Orioles. They took 2 of 3 from the Tigers, and then they just swept the Royals in Kansas City this week. I mean, the Rays looked essentially unstoppable since that series with the Orioles ended, and I'm going back to look through the 3 games they played. Yeah, they gave up a grand total of 1 run total in those 3 games against Kansas City. They are pitching the heck out of the ball right now. They have been incredible. And in game 1 tonight against 7:05 Apple TV Plus, Ryan Pepio, the talented 27-year-old righty with a 3.04 ERA, goes for the Rays. He gave the Orioles 8 innings of 1-run ball when he faced them last week. And it will be Tomoyuki Sugano for the Orioles. 3.55 ERA, 3 rough starts in a row. The O's gave him a couple of extra days of rest. He did not face the Rays in that last series. Game 2 is Saturday at 4:05 at Oriole Park. Zach Littell, the right-hander, will go for the Rays with a 3.78 ERA. He went 6 innings of 3-run ball against the Orioles last week. And Zach Eflin, it's Zach versus Zach in this one. Eflin's been scuffling a little bit. He gave up 7 earned runs on 12 hits in 5 innings to the Rays last time, and then followed up with 3 innings of 6-run ball against the Yankees. Orioles definitely need Eflin to figure it out again. And then finally on Sunday, Saturday's game is on MASN. Sunday's game also on MASN at 1:35 to finish out the series. It'll be Taj Bradley going for the Rays, the right-hander with a 4.57 ERA. You probably know Taj Bradley because he's the guy who gave up all those runs last week when the Orioles took an 8-0 lead. O's got him for 6 runs on 6 hits in an inning and a third, and then he followed up with 6 2/3 scoreless against Kansas City. So hopefully the bad version of Bradley returns to Baltimore this weekend. He'll go up against Dean Kramer, who's been throwing the ball much better lately. 5 innings of 1-run ball when he faced the Rays in Tampa last week. This Rays offense has been solid lately, but the pitching staff's been phenomenal. Yandy Diaz is also 11 for 24 at the plate since the Orioles series. He's been red hot, so watch out for him. Chandler Simpson, the speedster, who was not in the big leagues last week, is back with the Rays. He's kind of a difference maker as well. Should be a fun series this weekend. The Tampa Bay Rays at 46-35, don't look now. They are a half game back of the Yankees for first place in the AL East entering this weekend. When in the world did that happen? Rays are hot. Yankees aren't playing good baseball. Rays could be in first place at the end of the weekend. Orioles hope, though, that that's not the case, and they can stop that from happening. But either way, I will be back on Monday recapping all 3 games of this series between the O's and the Rays. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.